Hey, welcome back to Common Sense OT Security. As all of you know, an OT asset inventory is the foundation of OT security, because how would you be able to know anything about your risks or try to protect anything if you don't know what you have? So that is common sense. That's a common sense item. What we are presently doing in this mini series about the foundation, the basics of OT asset inventories, is there is actually a science behind creating a useful OT asset inventory. And that's very important. So just think about it for a second. I would allege that most of you, if not all of you, do have some form of OT asset inventory, at least what they call an OT asset inventory. And most of the time, that's an outdated Excel spreadsheet. However, that is what they think of as an OT asset inventory. And, maybe you can even legitimately make the point, because there is some data in there that points to some PLC or some operator station. The problem here is that such an instance of an OT asset inventory is not useful. You cannot use it for much, if only because it's usually outdated and contains information that is obsolete and in this respect misleading. So we're going to figure out what is needed, all the various components that are needed to arrive at a useful OT asset inventory. And if your OT asset inventory is not useful, you will never have a good foundation for any systematic OT security efforts. You will never be able to arrive at continuous improvement of your OT security posture. You will just be floating around on the ocean of threats and risks. And this is not what a position that you want to be in. So in today's episode, we are looking at two foundational dimensions of an OT asset inventory, namely OT asset geolocation and ISA-95 function. And now we are in the territory of metadata. Metadata is data about data. That's why it's called metadata, because it's on a meta level for these underlying data. Geolocation and system function is not something like an IP address or make and model that you can usually directly pull from the device, from the OT asset. So this needs to be added on top, and it needs to be added manually. And just in case it surprises you, no, that's a fact. So you will always have to do some additional fine-tuning of your OT asset inventory by hand. And the big question then becomes how easy that process is made by the tool you're using. If you're using Excel, it's just a lost cause. You will never be able to make it happen because of all the because of the complexity that is involved here. And you will see what I'm talking about in this session in just a couple of minutes. But first, let's focus on geolocation. If you don't know where an asset actually resides, you're pretty much lost, because at some point in time, you will have to ask questions, well, where are these obsolete devices, for example, devices that you can no longer buy spare parts for? Where are those vulnerable devices there where I have to update the firmware? So, and you already get the gist here. This is what makes an OT asset inventory useful or not. All right, so because your Excel spreadsheet, let's just assume it contains all the right basic data, such as make and model or such as the IP address. If it doesn't tell you where the device is, then you're pretty much lost. Your OT asset inventory isn't useful. And back in the old days, it wasn't such a problem, because that spreadsheet was usually maintained by the control engineer in charge, if he had the time to do so. And so therefore, because it was residing on Bob's PC, office PC, or engineering workstation, it was clear this data This asset information is about Bob's stuff, all the PLCs, etc., the network switches that are under Bob's jurisdiction. Now, in today's world, this has changed because Bob now has to be responsible for, I don't know, 500 of those PLCs, operator stations, network switches, etc. And even Bob himself can no longer maintain the whole geolocation stuff in his head or in his Excel spreadsheet. And certainly, especially when it comes to a more broad use of this information, such as the OT security specialists come in, etc., then you need a much more accurate representation of geolocation. And I'm going to show you how this is accomplished in the OT-based OT asset management system. So let's start by simply going from the device inventory, where you have all the individual devices in one table. And we go from there to the locations directory in OT-base. And this already gives you a good idea of what you need. So if you look at the sidebar here, you see all these different items, devices, software systems, networks, and locations. These are all different perspectives on the assets that you have in this inventory. Different ways to look at those assets. And here we are looking at geolocation. So you see we have continents like USA, or okay, not a continent necessarily, so you could also call that North America and then include Canada and whatnot. But from there, you go down to Charlotte. So these are individual sites now. And these are, you can clearly identify this already because they're in boldface and they have this home icon in front of them. So that tells you that's an individual site. And from there, you can go further down. You can make it more and more granular in this hierarchy, and you would see things like body in white. So that's one building. In the building, you have rooms, you may have cabinets, you have different units. So in other words, you can map your geolocation hierarchy at a very granular level. The level that you choose is totally up to you, so there is no arbitrary limitation that OT-base would impose on you. That means if you wanted to, you can even go down into racks and slots in the control system cabinet. And anytime that you do something like this, and usually this already starts with discovery. So you already tell discovery, well, these devices are located in that particular cabinet, as an example, or in that room. And then everything is sorted out when the asset information is imported into OT-base inventory. So you can check out the components or the items in such a location or a sublocation just by doing a double click. This is a drill down, and then as you see here, usually it helps or it enhances usability quite a lot if you also add things like floor maps or even pictures, which certainly make it very, very easy and reliable to identify the assets you're actually talking about. Because at some point in time, those devices may need to be replaced, or that some kind of maintenance needs to be done with those devices. And if there is no doubt about the geolocation, then this enhances your reliability. And so this is how it looks like in OT-base. You get all kinds of additional information if you want to, but let's start at a higher level. So if I do this drill down for the whole site, then it also gives you an idea how this data is represented in OT-base. So now you're looking at that site, and the location map that is displayed here shows you the context, like the neighborhoods. So this shows me where I would be able to find flat rock if I have any trouble doing that. certainly it would probably make a lot more sense if you think about a factory in Europe as an example, where you would not necessarily know where a particular small town in Italy, you have never heard about that, but the map might help. Then you also get another map of the particular site where you can point out the various buildings, or let's just say the next level, right? So again, this is a hierarchy, and any of the next lower levels are exposed automatically, and you can arrange those hotspots here in a very simple manner. And just to give you an idea, this is fully interactive. So, and for any sublocation, then you can do an easy drill down like so. When I do a double click here, then I go into the next level, and you see how that works, right? So now this is my network my neighborhood here, my locational neighborhood. And from there, I'm just going a level deeper where I see the various sublocations in that room, okay? But anyhow, so for any given hierarchy level, you now get a consolidated profile, as we call it, which shows you all the important aspects of your asset details. So for example, you get an automatic network topology map that shows you what's going on in that particular building. In this example, you see a breakdown of all the networks, and this information is all consolidated automatically by OT-Base. You see all the various systems. This is a segue to ISA-95 function, which we will discuss later on. And then we have all the devices in that particular building, or just geolocation entity that I'm presently looking at. Okay, and from there, certainly, as always, you can do another drill down into the particular device. So the idea is, now that you have this representation as a hierarchy and where everything is connected, it really becomes very simple to navigate through your geolocation, to get an idea what is at that geolocation, or the other way around, to understand very quickly where you would find an asset in question. And that is really super important. So you can map out your hierarchy in any way, shape, or form you like. This is not determined by OT-Base. If you want to start with continents, you can do so. But if you're only operating, let's just say, one site, you may not want to do that because you already know where the damn site is, but you may want to start with the buildings as an example. And then you can go down as deep as you want. As you see here, you can also slap additional qualifiers on those locations, we call those the location groups. In this example, we have used here the idea, well, this is a clean room. Unit 1 is a clean room. Unit 2 requires personal protective equipment. So just to make it more usable so that everybody knows what to expect when they actually want to go there. Okay, so I think that gives you an idea about geolocation and how important and useful it actually is. If you want to use it in the excuse me, in the device inventory, and in other places, also in the vulnerability management workflow, etc., you can also limit the scope of what you are looking at. And we have done that here in this example already. So we have already limited the geolocation to this flat rock facility. And as you see, this is completely granular. So if we just wanted to single out that particular sublocation, the body in white building, I just need to click on it, and then the whole inventory is, the results are adjusted in order to actually reflect what's in there. And the same thing happens when you go to, let's just say, you go to the vulnerability management workspace. where you can also set that scope. So if I just wanted to know, well, what is, show me the vulnerabilities, but only those that affect the devices in the body in white building. And it just goes like that, okay? Or if I would say in the US, so let's just check out the where I have devices which are affected by this particular vulnerability, then OT-based will also show you the geolocation right away. So by simply using the top level, or as we call them, the reference locations, which are usually the sites, using the sites to show you what to show you the distribution of affected devices. So right here, I would say I would see in Flatrock I have 16 devices that are affected by this particular vulnerability. So this gives you an idea about the usefulness, because vulnerability management is another very good example. In OT, vulnerability management is done locally, because it involves the testing of any patching strategy, etc. And usually it involves things like then updating a firmware or installing a security patch on Windows boxes. And this is done locally by the control engineers, usually in charge by the responsible engineers. And therefore, you must know where the damn things are. And in OT-based, you can then use such a filter to define a mitigation task specifically for that site or for that building, because engineers in other sites, they have no stakes in actually mitigating those vulnerabilities. So I think that gives you some insight on why this is so super important, and also what it adds in usability when you have this hierarchical model. So the next thing we are going to look at is ISA-95 function. This is sometimes confused with geolocation. So in OT-based, we now go to the systems inventory, where you can group your OT assets along the model of ISA-95, which is functional. It also starts with a site, but from there, it is then going into functional units, which could be a machine line, and below that machine line, you can have work cells as an example. So this is supported by this system inventory in OT-base. And unfortunately, because it usually starts with a site, people confuse it with locations. But it's not the same. So there are both independent dimensions, which usually overlap or almost always overlap, but it's not the same. The difference is that here you are only looking at the function of the assets, and meaning process function. And in the geolocation perspective, process function is completely irrelevant. It's just about where can I find the damn thing? Where is it if I need to replace it, as an example? So in other words, for a geolocation, if you cannot slap a GPS coordinate on it, I mean, at least in theory, it's not a location. Just to give you an example, some people confuse network addresses with location. That's wrong. No, a network is not a location. So, look at it this way. If you cannot take a picture of it, it's not a location. You can take a picture of a building, of a room, of a cabinet, but you cannot take a picture of a network. That doesn't exist. So that doesn't work. So here we are talking about function, and function can be associated with location, but there are other cases where it is not. So let me give you a simple example. When we look at this example here for our Flatrock site, so in the body in white building, we have a couple of work cells, and those work cells are defined functionally. And let's just assume, well, first of all, let's open the damn thing here. Let's open the profile. This again shows you the geolocation, just for context, but the point is those work cells that we have within here, they are not necessarily tied to they don't necessarily share a geolocation. Very simple example. So if you think about this, the various units that we have here. So think about the trunk unit. There may be some assets like network switches, computers, etc., that functionally are associated with the trunk work cell, but they're not inline. You won't, if you go to the trunk work cell, you will not find it there. You will find those switches or computers, for example, in a server room. And this is why these two dimensions are not identical. So you can express this by including those switches and computers here in that trunk subsystem. That is not a problem. They can show up here, but their geolocation can be different. Now, the other thing that you are going to see with those system profiles, a whole new level of functionality comes in. For example, release management. So with the systems, it is assumed that all the assets that are part of this system, they are working in concert. That implies that if the configuration of one asset changes, it might affect the whole system. And therefore, for the systems in OT-Base, we also provide release management. That means that somebody can approve a system configuration. And by doing that, you now establish system integrity or configuration integrity. Because once that anything is changed, configuration of any component is changed, OT-Base will tell you, now the system is no longer in an approved stage. And I think this is a good example to once more explain the difference against geolocation, because, well, whatever is in one building doesn't necessarily all work in concert. So as an example, you may have multiple machine lines in one building, but they usually operate independent of one another, okay? And therefore, if the configuration, let's just say in line 1 changes, it most likely doesn't affect the overall functionality of line 2. And for that reason, you would not find a release management in the geolocation view, but you find it here in the functional view. Then you get a network topology for that system, and then you can also model the system relations. And this is now a process view, right? So for example, you can model and document the material flow as one very simple example. And this allows you to arrive at a much deeper system understanding than you have ever been able to do before. And in the context of OT security, this system understanding is extremely important when you think about determining criticality. So at some point in time, you want to be able to single out those very critical assets, because that will have an impact on your risk calculation, and that will have an impact on your mitigation strategy. And this is a great way to arrive at valid assumptions about criticality, because once that you understand the process dependencies, you will figure out, oh, damn, you know, we never thought about that support system, but it's so much more critical than other systems, because let's just assume, just as an example, we have, I don't know, 5 or 10 machine lines that rely on this crappy old support system, which might be something like chilled air or vacuum, whatever. might also be an HVAC system. And this is, so just think about clean room. I used the example earlier. So that, my friends, gives you a lot of mileage. And then you see an automatic breakdown of all the assets that are part of this system or subsystem. You will get an automatic bill of materials. So a whole lot of goodies that will just propel your system understanding and also your system integrity. So I mentioned that earlier. Once that you tell OT-based all of these make up a system, it would also call out things like, well, I'm just going to tell you there are a couple of non-compliant devices within that system. And we will get to policies and compliance and audits in another session. But just to give you an idea how useful it is when for a particular functional unit, you get all the information in one place. Right? So then you arrive at what usually is called the situational awareness. You will gain so much more insight about that particular system that has a certain process function within a with a given importance or criticality. And just as another example, let's just say we want to express that. So we are just editing this system right now, or this subsystem, the doors work cell in our example. As you can see here, I can slap a criticality rating on that system. And what this does is it automatically is inherited by all the devices that are a component in this system. So that means it dramatically reduces your workload, because now you're approaching criticality from a functional perspective. You have identified, this system is really, really important. And when you slap on that criticality rating here, it will be inherited by all the devices in that subsystem. And then everybody will know right away, well, probably these devices need some extra scrutiny when it comes to protection, when it comes to vulnerability mitigation, etc. So that is what I wanted to talk about today. And mainly, I think my major point is to give you an idea what is required to arrive at a useful OT asset inventory. We all agree by now, well, the foundation of OT security, okay, that's all fine and dandy. But how do you turn an OT asset inventory that used to be an outdated Excel spreadsheet into something that's really useful, that really gives you some mileage when it comes to OT security? And geolocation and ISA-95 function are super important metadata dimensions. If you don't have those dimensions, your understanding and also your capability to do risk mitigation, etc., will be severely limited. And the benefit that you get from the OT-based OT asset management system is that you can navigate around in those complex dimensions in seconds just by working the mouse. And also the idea that once that you have those associations established, then OT-base is able to create a whole bunch of documentation automatically, because it can just tie all the various pieces together and give you things like a consolidated network topology diagram, just like that for that system. It can give you the bill of materials for that machine line as an example, just like that. And that really goes much further than I've even addressed in this episode, because just to give you another idea, once that you have defined such a system, you can clone it. So if you think about a greenfield situation, you can clone that system and arrive at your template for the OT system configuration that you can give your automation vendor, telling him, well, this is how it should look like, with all the required software products such as antivirus, etc. So that really goes a long way. One other aspect along those lines would be, well, that's a perfect way to just speed your way through the factory acceptance test and also through the SAT later on, because OT-based will tell you right away, oh, there are some deviations from the planned configuration. And just in case you missed that part, so when you clone a system, an existing system, OT-base will populate it with all those assets, but will set it to a planned stage because it was cloned from existing devices. And then you can use that as a template against which you can match an existing configuration. So just a whole lot of stuff, whole lot of functionality that it's going to provide. It's going to make your life so much easier. Okay, that's it for today. See you next week.